Okay, welcome back. It's my pleasure, to introduce, this next session. I'm going to introduce, Rob Keeve, the CEO and co-founder of Flow Commerce. Flow has been, a long time, supporter of Guelph. So we really thank Rob and his whole team for again helping pull this together. And with him is Chip from Made In. So we're going to be talking about the Made In, international story here. So I'm going to fade to black here. I'm going to turn it over to Rob and Chip, and I'll re-enter later on. So take it away, guys.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Guelph, for hosting us today, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm delighted to be joined today by Chip Malt, CEO and co-founder of Made In Cookware. I will leave it to him to introduce the brand, but just to set the stage for today, we have 40 minutes together where Chip and I are hoping to talk to you about the cross-border case study that is Made In Cookware and how successful they've been over the past 12 months. It's truly a remarkable story, and how Flow, we have helped enable their success and draw on best practices that we've seen across the industry, what it takes to go international, to go global, how to do it most effectively, and what kind of results can be achieved if you're fine-tuning everything for a great local experience. So with that, let me introduce Chip. Chip, welcome today. It's not often we have someone who's come from a banking background, been heavily involved in a successful business like Roan, and then gone on to become a co-founder CEO in their own right. Welcome.
A reformed banker, a former banker, old life of mine. But thank you for having me. Again, my name is Chip Malt, co-founder of Made In Cookware. Just a quick and dirty about us. We partner with artisans from the US and Western Europe to create performance, professional quality kitchen tools, everything from wine glasses from Italy down to stainless clad cookware from the US and Italy as well, down to some cutlery from France, and then plateware in the UK. So have a global supply chain presence from areas of the world that are really known for experts in the craft of culinary. And then we partner with the best chefs in the world, so Michelin star restaurants and chefs around the world as well, to help test, develop, and bring those products to life through our marketing. Obviously, we're a US-based company, but have been international now and shipping internationally for about 2 years, all with the help of Flow.
Thank you, Chip. It's a remarkable success story. If you haven't been to their site, I encourage you to. I believe you've got north of 10 million site traffic over a year, which is unbelievable. I mean, it's up there with some of the top brands, and it's a fantastic testimony to the value proposition and some of the content and products you got on your site.
Thank you.
For those who aren't yet familiar with Flow, Flow is a turnkey modular solution that supports brands like Made In Cookware to go global, or if they're already global, to better fine-tune their shopping experience for their customers to maximize sales. Here you see the 6 modules behind Flow, allowing brands to localize the site, the landing pages being hyper-localized, local currency, the right products, close rounding, landed costs, duties and taxes pre-displayed with de minimis thresholds so that it can be sold in a localized fashion. And if there are tax advantages to purchasing below a threshold, it happens automatically, all the way through to logistics and checkout, logistics, international shipping, to be able to present the cheapest and the fastest ship options, through to checkout, where we help brands by surfacing nearly 100 different payment methods in a highly performant checkout to maximize conversion rates. And then the final 2 things that we do as a business are finely tuned variables. I think there's over 100 different variables that could be finely tuned to find the perfect experience for consumers by country. And then we A/B test them with our clients to maximize conversion rates. And the final aspect is being able to manage the product syndications so that your product feeds can be used for international paid advertising across the world in a very seamless, in sync way. Let's talk about insights and what we're seeing in the market. And this is not a product pitch for Flow, but rather an opportunity to learn about the success stories like Made In Cookware. So the first question perhaps for us to answer for the audience, Chip, is why go global in the first place? Is the domestic market not enough? Why are we looking to 7 billion consumers around the world?
Yeah, I think any private equity or venture-backed company and board will tell you that nothing is ever enough. So I think we have that pressure on us at all times. But no, more realistically, I mean, at Maiden, we always talk about what can we do that our competitors can't, and how can we double down on the value props that you mentioned. And for us, all of our competitors are made in a couple of the same factories out of China, and we've built and spent a lot of time developing these real artisan craftsmanship stories in areas like Italy and France and the US, and there's global demand for that supply chain. I mean, you go over to Asian markets and they love US made goods, they love Italian luxury. That story resonates around the world more than some of the other traditional direct-to-consumer players. And so for us, that made us get into global a lot quicker than I think a lot of normal direct and digitally native companies do, is because it just fits so well with the value props and the product stories that we were telling. So within about a year of our life cycle into it, we launched with Flow. It was inbound. We knew we had to be shipping international. I think our fourth sale was to Singapore, and it was a really pain in the ass process. I did all the paperwork myself, and then obviously ran into a lot of the issues expanding that, and with people writing into us saying I didn't expect $84 of duties on an $80 pan. Like, why didn't you tell me this up front? I don't want it, kind of stuff. And so there was, so it was a clear issue, and there's a clear demand, and there's a clear issue, and so we launched with that really quickly. And for us, like we talk about a few things. One is, again, like doubling down on things that Maiden can do well, which is this supply chain story. And then secondly, we were looking at our sales patterns in the US, and it was a very bell curve around US waking times, right? Like almost no sales, at the 0 mark to 6 a.m. Eastern or whatever it is. And then it would start to ramp up, peak throughout the day, and then ramp down into, by the time the West Coast sleeps. And so internally, we talk a lot about, we spend so much time in the digital marketing front, incrementing on small changes here and there in the US. Like, wouldn't it be a bigger change if we could just go from an 18-hour sales day to a 24-hour sales day? And so it's kind of those two combinations of factors. Like, that may not make sense for everyone, but for us, like, there's clear demand for it. We wanted to do it because no one else was doing it at that time. And then I'm obviously expanding the sales period for us.
Perfect. Sounds like the market opportunity is just large globally. So it's a big opportunity to capitalize on, particularly if you're venture backed. Why wouldn't you? I think you were saying why would you just focus on a domestic market when there's a global one easily available? And sure, there are points of friction, but if those can be easily managed, you flick a switch and you could be selling globally 24/7 without the need to just focus on a more narrow domestic market. Correct.
You said it better than I did.
I was just summarizing. much more insightful comment. And more broadly, it is a huge opportunity. It's funny, we've been in business for 5 years, and initially we were evangelizing, we're proselytizing the beauty of selling cross-border. It could be big, maybe consumers will purchase overseas. And now it's a $1 trillion business growing to 1.6 over the next 4 years. And that's just business to consumer cross-border. So it's no longer a market opportunity for tomorrow. It's here today. This is 10-15% of total e-commerce is already cross-border. And if you look at site traffic, it's much higher still. So this is an opportunity for today and definitely a growth engine for the future. It's no longer kind of a promise that we used to pitch. And here we're looking at growth rates and penetration rates. So domestic e-com, of course, outstrips cross-border today by a factor of about 5. But the growth rate, interestingly, for cross-border e-commerce is outstripping domestic. These numbers were pre-COVID, but I think later on in the decks or in the appendix, we also have our measurements during COVID, and both are true. Cross-border e-com is outstripping even domestic e-com. Why? Some possible reasons are what we hypothesize on the right. Search is global by nature. So if you're searching for cookware, you're likely to find made in, whether you're in Singapore, France, or Brazil. It's not going to be restricted by geography. Even more so on mobile, with mobile commerce becoming 50-60% of total e-commerce. 2, the more you have social influencers or celebrities or influencers promoting, the more likely it is that they have a global audience and they're referred into the site, not recognizing borders and just being able to expect to buy frictionlessly. And also some of the points that you raised, Chip, some of it's deliberate, some of it is brand pushed, not just market pulled. It's cheaper to acquire customers in many geographies, so paid advertising may be more efficient to be targeted in those geographies. And for brands who already have distribution networks in other countries, you're already generating end consumer pull. There's already some brand awareness. Why not capitalize on that demand and encourage them to purchase through direct channels as well? So I think for those and many other reasons, cross-border e-com is here today and growing fast. This is what I was alluding to earlier. This is actual site traffic in 2020, as measured by us, our own in-house research. If you look at the IR 1000 brands, 40% of their traffic now comes from outside of their domestic markets. So if they could convert it as higher rate as domestic, that's 40% of your total sales should be coming from overseas. So if you're not already matching your international revenue to your traffic, for sure there's a growth opportunity there. And finally, I'm not going to touch on all of these. The deck will be available for those who want it afterwards. But just to highlight the first one of the questions as to should I be going global now is looking at your international site traffic. There are many tools you can use to do that, or in-house analytics. But what percentage of your total traffic comes from overseas? If it's more than 5%, that's a great opportunity. If it's in the 10 to 15% range, then you should definitely be international and capitalizing on that, because a good portion of your revenue should be coming from international. And also comparing your international site conversion rates to your domestic and seeing how much worse it is a good signal that there's low-hanging fruit here to be had.
On that point too, this is something we struggled with early on, right? Is like, when's the right time to pull the trigger? Right? From a brand perspective and from a theoretical side of things, we knew we wanted to be global. We knew our product would resonate, our story would resonate global, but what was the right time? And you talk a lot about kind of using data here to inform that decision. For us, I think the thing we struggled with early on in our life cycle was, it was like a chicken or the egg conversation for us. We weren't doing international PR. We weren't putting any efforts behind anything internationally. We were actually like turning away influencers from international markets because we weren't shipping to them. And so the last thing we wanted to do was create a terrible customer experience. Someone from Canada says, X chef is promoting you guys. Like, can I order from you? And we're like, sorry, no. So we actually had an issue with like a brand is ready to go global. It took a slight leap of faith to get past that mark. But then, that goes back to the slide before, which is, all the benefits of it. And so, for us, like, it was actually more of a strategic decision and a belief from the management team and the team at that time, as well as obviously some anecdotal plus real data as well.
But you were saying, Chip, that you went global very early in the life cycle of the business. If you were doing it again today, would you do the same again?
I think we would have launched with it, actually.
Interesting. We're seeing a bit of that, particularly celebrity-driven ones. Lady Gaga's House Labs is a customer, and we've got many other celebrities actually that have their e-com site powered by Flow. And there they feel it's table stakes. We can't, our market is a global market. It would almost be discriminatory to say we're just launching in one market and our fans and audience in the rest of the markets couldn't get it. And they from day one insist it's a global market or none.
Agreed. And at some level, we're influencer or celebrity driven as well. Our main marketing vehicles are Michelin star chefs, and they tend to be more hyper local. A Grant Achatz in Chicago is a main ambassador of ours, and actually an investor, Tom Colicchio out of New York, the head judge of Top Chef, a little bit more national just via Top Chef, but very recognizable names, very behind the brand. They're in our TV marketing, they're in a lot of our marketing assets, and they also have, especially Tom, via Top Chef, the global reach. That we kind of underestimated as well. So I 100% agree with you, especially if that's a component of your marketing.
Brilliant. And I want to maybe juxtaposition how you think and how these other celebrity-driven brands think, in contrast to yesteryear's brands and retailers who I think used to sit around board tables when that was a thing, debating for many hours, should we penetrate a new market? Are we ready to do it? how many departments need to have cross-functional team meetings about going into the next market? Have we really fully saturated our domestic market? And it was a big thing, and they had to be sure there was nothing left to eke out of the domestic market before they would venture into, crossing the border into Canada. And now it almost feels like we're saying, why wouldn't you? We're flicking a switch. The only question is the customer experience good enough? And if we can find an easy, simple way of doing that, why would you not turn on 200 countries?
Yeah, I mean, we spend so much time. I run our digital marketing and kind of BI and data science teams. That's my background, and we spend so much time on incrementality testing across channel and attribution, and within the domestic channel, right? And so, are our Facebook ads actually incremental to our TV ads, to our radio ads, and how do they all play together correctly to optimize, right? It's like there's an easy answer to incrementality, and it's not hitting the same customer, right? And so. It's just like an interesting argument and kind of helps you frame some of the "are you ready to go global" conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's exactly right. And that brings us on to the next question, which is, why wouldn't you? What are the points of friction that we're addressing as we go cross-border? What are the challenges? What does need to be thought through? Some of the audience members may not yet be global or early in their process. So they may be thinking about what are the hurdles we're going to have to address? What are the biggest pitfalls that you come across when you go cross-border? Can you talk to your experience, Chip, maybe pre-flow and post-flow?
Yeah, I mean, from operationally, it was dealing with like the actual shipment area of it, to the operational fulfillment side of things. Canada USPS was great. We had no shipping lane set up for USPS internally. We were on the FedEx rate card. The different forms and everything that we had to fill out, like all of that stuff, just like, especially when we were a small team, was a nightmare. It took hours out of our day to figure out, and then it would get stuck at customs, and we'd have to call them, and inevitably we mess it up because we were young and stupid and didn't know what we were doing. And so, just the fulfillment side was an absolute nightmare. And we hated doing it, almost like despised getting their national order, because it would be like, oh no, and then we'd flip a coin and someone would have to go figure it out, right? And so that side was it. And then obviously the customer side as well. So everything from transparency of the flow. So we talked a little bit about it, but the duties and taxes by county, it turned out in Canada was super confusing. That each different province had a different tax rate depending on the product type. And that was stuff that we were answering customer support tickets, but Googling right on the side, and had no idea what we were talking about, but we're trying to put a professional voice forward. And so having all that stuff automated, having that stuff clear to the customer, so there's no surprises. I mean, I think as a direct and digitally native company, the thing that is your advantage is your one-on-one connection with your customer and the customer experience. That should and has to be better than retail. And this was just a clear example of it not being. We were messing up at kind of every process of the supply chain. So that was it. And then obviously just the like small tactical things, but localization of currency, absolutely huge. I think America has a very America first attitude. And so it's like, oh, PayPal and Amex, like everyone uses it, right? And so localization of payment types was a massive unlock as well. And so really the end-to-end flow, it was broken at about just every portion of the journey, and a challenge and stuff that we had enough going on in our early startup life that we were not going to figure it out ourselves.
Right. Perfect. I think this is very typical. You're not atypical of what it feels like selling cross-border if you're not being deliberate about it and intentional. If you look at surveys, it's largely the same things you were alluding to. When I think 500 consumers were polled, these were the things that they rated as the top barriers to purchasing cross-border: shipping being expensive, shipping being slow, tax and duties being high or not visible. I think the bigger pain point is it's FedEx on your doorstep saying $83 to Singapore, you didn't realize it, and you being an unhappy customer, maybe refusing to accept the product, and now the brand has to get it back in addition to having lost the sale. Not being able to display duties on the site is a huge customer experience issue. Currency exchange rate is always one that comes up. If you're not displaying in local currency, there's all kinds of questions around what was the exchange rate used? Why does the amount of my card not match what I saw at checkout? And consumer feedback, blowback there. Language, particularly around checkout, payment methods you mentioned. wanting to have local payment methods in countries where that's norm, otherwise you may lose the sale, and local currency. And refunds, every brand has a different view on refunds. Sorry, I should say returns more than refunds. But for international, sometimes there is an expectation that I won't be able to return it because it's cross-border, and I understand that as a consumer. So maybe I'll be more judicious about whether I should purchase it or not. Other times, brands who are very customer experience focused will offer international returns as well. And certainly we offer that as a business.
We had a funny anecdote on that. We actually had someone on Reddit, which, if you know, Reddit is a very scary place to have any mention of your brand on. It happens to attract some very vocal people. And we had an absolutely irate customer from Canada on the return side. And since then, we've implemented a better returns policy, more streamlined through you guys. But this was earlier in the days, and he came back with this, paragraph. I don't know who has this much time. Paragraph for the paragraph, blasting our experience, and the response, which never happens on Reddit, was all just, they're actually doing way better than anyone else international. Like, if you go to this brand who are way bigger, they don't even offer your local currency. Like, at least they're doing that. It was all on this very minute point, and the dude, OP, the original poster, just got absolutely crushed on it. So it was pretty funny. It was a very tip of the hat. We saw the post and we were freaking out because of Reddit's just general community. Yeah.
I love it. But Reading's up the road from Slough, which is where the British The Office takes place. So maybe this was David Brent who posted it.
Exactly.
So what should it look like if we're contrasting the bad with the challenges that you have to address to what we want our customer experience to look like globally? We'd love you to share your experience at Maiden, Chip, and where you are today.
Yeah, so we're actually operating on for every country. We'll get to it a little bit later, but we sold into 69 countries last year, which for our second year with international shipping as an opportunity, we're very happy with. We do everything from A/B testing around how we show the experience, so our duties and taxes in the final price, so that at the end of the day, there's no sticker shock at that last step of the process, down to giving customers the option while still showing them the transparency behind what they will be paying at doorstep. Everything through covering part of shipping costs like we do in the US, down to there not being an expectation, as you mentioned, of us covering any of the shipping costs, and some price point things as well. There's some internal costs for us that's a little bit more expensive to ship to certain markets. So some margin adjustments based on those markets. And every single one of those has been tested and is always going through a test or multiple tests. But for us, it's about trying to make it as close as possible to our US experience, and one that we're proud of as a brand, more importantly.
That's interesting. So there are a few different ways to price in foreign markets. One would be, we'd like to get the same sort of margin as our domestic market, and the price will reflect that. A second would be, we're solving for maximum conversion rates, and we'll test different prices to find the best trade-off between price and volume. How do you think about it?
On the margin side, more of the former. We've been, to be honest, our capacity constraint or our limiting of growth has been due to inventory capacity. So for us, we don't want to take a international sale at a conversion rate optimization at a less margin than we would if we could just sell it domestically, because again, inventory has been our limiting force for us. So we are more than happy to send it internationally, but we want to maintain the same margin profile.
Great. It's nice to be supply constrained if the demand is not limited. We did a test recently with a client on price elasticity on Flow, and we found, I think we did about 12 different price points. We took as examples of all products that were priced around those 12 clusters, and did a price elasticity test, dropping price by 4.5% and 9.5%. And interestingly, all of them outperforms all price points on both tests, saw more than double volume, twice the increase in volume offset by a factor of 2 the price drop. So it showed that there was plenty of room for them to increase their volume if they wanted to take small haircuts on pricing.
Sounds like they had more inventory than us.
Different market.
Yeah, exactly.
From the Flow side, what do we see? So our client success team lean in heavily, and curious to see if they have done in Made In. I hope so. But they invite our clients to set up different country experiences, or we'll do it on their behalf. The top 10, the top 20 to the top 30, based on what we've seen work best in different countries. So what kind of rounding rule should we set for Canada versus France versus Singapore? Should it round to a multiple of 5, 10, end in .0, .99? Should we include sales tax or keep it separate? Should we do the same for duty or not? So that's step one. Catalog targeting. Do we want to sell the whole catalog to every country in the world, or do we want to target some products to some countries and manage exclusions, not sell everything to every country? And obviously, if there are any product restrictions, those would be automatically flagged. Trying to find the right setting, as I said, on duties and taxes, sometimes factoring things like the de minimis threshold, the threshold below which you don't pay duty tax. Sometimes thinking about your shipping thresholds or even your pricing relative to a de minimis threshold is advantageous if you're solving for high conversion rates. What are the right payment methods in different countries? Shall we test different configurations, which you can very easily do? And testing different shipping options, different shipping carriers, different shipping thresholds, different delivery windows. All of this could be configured for the best experience in each country to solve for maximum conversion rates. I won't cover this, but Flow is a very technology-first country, almost a country, but we're still a company at the moment. 1,000 different API endpoints, which give us a lot of flexibility to keep implementations quick and simple, and a lot of flexibility to adapt to different use cases. So our clients are super varied, from a Made in cookware to globally recognized apparel brands to crypto wallets to handbags, shoes, health and beauty, jewelry, and many other sectors.
What's a cool way that people are using the API flex endpoints to do something cutting edge?
Oh, good question. It's all over. It could be trivial things like discounts and promotions that work domestically, making sure they work internationally, to brands that have DCs in different countries and want to ship truly globally inventory aware. So a consumer in Iceland, shall we pull from our French inventory or our Detroit inventory? And looking at the pricing on a fully landed basis, factoring not just the cost of the product in inventory, but the cost of shipping and the cost of duty and tax from each point to point.
Cool.
And some celebrities, we do localized carts as they're posting on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, whatever. They'll be posting with localized carts so that consumers around the world clicking through will get a local experience in 200 different countries. So all of this is in aid of seeing what, I guess, all of our partners get in terms of their measures of success. Sometimes success in our experience has been cost saving, sometimes sales growth, sometimes conversion rates. So we'd love for you to share with the audience, Chip, your perspective on how you think about success, what's important for you as you look back on 2020 and you look forward to 2021, and what has been your empirical results over the past 12 months.
Yeah, we had a great international year last year. We went into the year without really focusing on it, to be honest. And we had set up the system, and we're working with you guys on optimizing everything and paying attention to it. But obviously, as a growing brand that's 3 years old, domestic was still our first priority. That kind of changed throughout the year as we started to see this really awesome organic traffic. We weren't marketing internationally at that point, and all of a sudden, this is actually a rounded number, but we were actually way over 10x year-over-year growth between our second and third year internationally. AOVs were higher, and people were covering shipping, so margins were actually better internationally. And then just the disparate nature of how people were finding us was super eye-opening. 69 countries, from Cyprus to the ones you'd expect, Korea, Canada, Australia, UK, et cetera, that, I think Germany, like those ones people associate with early adopters into US brands. But 69, I mean, we actually have a Slack notification that connects with you guys every time an international order comes in with the country's flag and like a little celebration, because the team was getting very excited about it. I mean, we were 3 years old and we're shipping, cookware sets to, all over the world, Mongolia, like everywhere you can think of. And it's just like, it was exciting. And I think for us, like outside of the numbers, which you can obviously read here on the page, which are very impressive and eye-opening, is as a young growing brand, like that can open your eyes as well from a strategic point of view of, we don't have to be this DTC brand that is, kind of pop colors in the US and like only on Instagram. Like this can actually be a global brand, ones that, you grew up respecting, the Nikes of the world and the Tiffany's and LVMH's, like all their brands, like all these massive global brands. Like as soon as you get an order from Mongolia, you're like, our story is resonating outside of what we ever thought. So, I think there's a cycle, yes, like empirical, like there's the ones on the sheet here, but then psychologically, very cool aspects of going international as well.
That's amazing. Amazing on so many different levels. One, the continuum, it's surely now a continuum as to what is a global brand. In the olden days, it's all the brands you mentioned, the LVMHs and the Nikes. But if you're generating orders from 69 countries and growing at this absurd rate, surely there's a continuum and you're well down that continuum to being a global brand. And hopefully it's self-fulfilling. That just drives more demands and more awareness globally.
Yep, that's the goal. It's become a crux of our strategy for this year.
Oh, that's great to hear. And just to echo or play back the results you're seeing a 10x, meaning 900%, 1,000% growth year on year in sales. And your margin hasn't been hit. If anything, it's slightly stronger.
Correct.
Wow.
And in my eyes, we're in the early stages of the optimization period. We haven't done, you mentioned what is like 100 toggles, like we've done probably 5 of them. So we're excited about the opportunity.
Wow, this is tremendous. I'm sure everyone's looking on either enviously or keen to hear the secret to your success. Can you share a few of the things that you've done that you think have contributed to this absurd level of growth?
Yeah, I mean, for us, like just through the platform, as you mentioned, it was taking learnings from our domestic, like we're always testing our domestic site. And so obviously the things that are applying there for consumers, like most likely will apply to the international consumers as well. So, no one loves to get surprised with shipping costs at the end of their checkout process. They've mentally committed to, this will cost me 200 pounds. And then all of a sudden get to the final stages and it costs you 400 pounds. Like that's a recipe for an abandoned cart. So, taking a lot of those learnings that we constantly test domestically and bringing them through the platform and then first testing them internationally, like maybe we're completely wrong. Turns out we're generally correct about those. And then just like studying the markets. It's pretty interesting. South Korea ends up having the fastest internet in the world, and actually Google's massively risen in terms of, you talked about search earlier in the thing. Like, Google's now a dominant player in South Korea. Like, so how can we, and we have an SEO team, like how can we start playing in those markets? And get attraction, and with our public relations team, like start making it part of our wider strategy. So I think it's a mixture, right? It's like understanding the market that is interesting to you as well as would be interested back at your products, and then taking the stuff that you're already doing as a business, you're already testing, you're already optimizing, and then bringing those internationally and not thinking about it as an afterthought.
Fantastic. It's amazing. Hopefully we can bring you back. We're going to come on to talk about what your plan is for next year, but we'd love to do the same session again in a year's time and see what level of growth you managed to achieve off of this massive base.
Cool.
Showing a few other results from Flow, not to beat our own drum, but to make the point that growing significantly internationally is very, very possible. And we try to make it super simple at Flow. Flow's raison d'etre is making it simple to be global and to giving client success on our side or our clients on their side the easy tools to do everything from one console to drive growth and change the customer experience. So MZ Wallace, we've done a case study with them. They've similarly seen enormous growth in international sales, 80%, and have used a huge number of our A/B tests to drive that growth. Sometimes A/B tests drive 5, 10, 20%, but layered on top of each other, it creates enormous lift. In addition, they've focused on driving down their cost, particularly in a COVID era, and we're happy to see a 60% increase in efficiency on the logistics side. Outerknown, Travis Hurd, the COO there, has in the past spoke about their extremely high lift. Who I don't think was willing to give a precise number, but said it's more than doubled in the past year, which in turn was, I believe, doubling on the prior year for Outerknown, the Kelly Slater brand. And they've seen similarly increases in not only sales, but improvements in logistics savings, logistics efficiency. Last one, I promise, and I'll jump over the rest. Universal Standard, wonderful apparel brand, a very heavy user of the A/B tests, and have seen 126% growth. And 80% of that comes just from conversion rate changes. So wonderful to see. Examples of these A/B tests, just to give people a sense of it, is country by country. Should we include sales tax in our product price or keep it separate? And getting that right could be a 20% difference. Should we show Klarna in Scandinavia as a first payment method or wait until checkout? Should we offer free shipping into Australia or run a duty-free promotion? Each of these is usually a double-digit lift in conversion, one way or the other. And then that becomes the new baseline, and we build on that into our playbook for the next A/B test. And that's how we help our partners get to 100% all the way up to 1,000% lift in sales. So looking ahead, Chip, how are you thinking about your strategy for this year? I think you mentioned international is strategic for the business. Would love you to elaborate a bit.
Yeah, I mean, going back to domestic versus international market, right? The thing that interests us is Amazon is just like absolutely set gold standards in the US, and every e-commerce brand is trying to at least match them or come close, not be offensively worse than them to some degree. And we're all kind of fighting over what that experience, that incremental better experience is, or close to Amazon experience is. So is it, subset of your products are stationed right up in Brooklyn, right outside New York, and you can deliver same day as an e-com brand like ours, whatever. And like that's a massive challenge as a e-commerce team and logistics team, and competing against someone who's a $1 trillion company, right? As a not $1 trillion company. And then you look at the international market, and just providing payment options can make you a better experience than most of your competitors. Like most of our competitors, a lot of ours don't even ship international. And so when you think about incrementality or kind of competitive advantages, like that is a lot easier to do than be the fastest into New York or something like that. And so, that's why kind of we're heads down and focused on it as well. And then the marketing side of things, like that, all that growth last year was completely organic. We again have a worldwide network of Michelin star chefs who use our products, and that generally contributes to markets that end up adopting us heavily, that word of mouth and growth. So how can we take the playbook that we've done really well with in the US and then amplify that in the international domestic markets around the world? So, who is the Grand Achatz of UK? Who is the Grand Achatz of Germany and South Korea? Is a chef still revered in South Korea the same way someone in Chicago reveres Grand Achatz? Like those questions, like that's next for us. And that is, and the answer is like it varies by market. And so it's actually really fun to dive into a lot of these different markets and research. An influencer in Instagram influencer in the US is like a lot like a KOL in Japan, and like how do people look up to them? But actually KOLs are a lot more commercial, and people are used to them selling products, where in the US it's supposed to be subtle and you're not supposed to realize you're getting sold a product. So like all these super interesting intricacies of how different markets work and what customers expect. That's really the next unlock for us. Obviously with your localization of feeds, like that goes into then putting that into PLAs on Google, and then putting that into syndicating it over to Facebook for DPA ads. But also we can kind of create the same construct that we have digitally within the US in different markets and develop strategies.
Brilliant. Sounds like you're really taking it up a gear. I feel like the eggs I see on the photo are a subliminal message that you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. It goes down to the food choices we use in our photography, right? Like that ad probably doesn't, or that photo probably doesn't resonate in a large part of the world. So,
right. And can you share which are the major markets internationally for you at the moment, and if that's different going forward?
yeah, we have some that I would say are data driven. The Canada's, UK's. We don't do any international content translation, so that has dictated the, I guess, initial markets we've gone into: Australia, UK, Canada. English-speaking countries, as well as ones that have large English-speaking populations, and then ones that also have large e-commerce affiliations as well. So the Germanys of the world and Japan tend to have large e-commerce just activity. So those are our first focuses.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure we could wax lyrical about the 10x growth and how you got there for a long time yet. But Jim, I can't see the questions coming in, so welcome you back and
let me kind of jump back in, gentlemen. Tremendous, like a story here. I don't know if I've ever heard Rob talk about absurd growth, but if it ever is such a thing, I think, Chip, you're achieving that. So congratulations, to the whole team in terms of what you've been able to achieve. One quick housekeeping item before I jump into a couple of quick questions for those of you who are interested in downloading this deck. Note that in the top right hand there's a download tab there, and again, lots of great information here that Rob and Chip have been sharing. There's actually one question that came in from the audience, and Rob, it may be a little more for you. I'm going to read it out. I think an audience member said, why not recognize where the web traffic is coming from and focus on selling in that market domestically to avoid the duties and import fees altogether for your customers? I think they may not realize you can't avoid them, but Rob, I mean, is that something you can kind of, talk towards in terms of, focusing on where that traffic is, versus, we heard from Chip, saying, wow, if we could have gone, global right out of the gate, that was something that, in hindsight, perhaps we could have expanded, broadly.
Sure. So I think the question is saying, if it turns out that France is the major market, why not just have goods locally in France and not have to pay import duties and fees? A few reasons. One, mostly what happens with international is it's a long tail. There is no one major market that accounts for everything. It's 50 major markets that account for 90% and 150 that account for the balance. So it typically doesn't work that way, and you'll want to just turn on them all and capitalize on all that traffic. And two, it's not free to get the products into market. You still then have to manage a wholesale import. You're still paying wholesale duties, and you're paying for a container, and then you've got warehousing locally. So for that model to work, which is perfectly viable, but to forward deploy inventory like that, you need to have enormous global sales to justify that cost before you hit a break-even point. Enormous meaning north of 100 million.
Again, just to kind of wrap up here, I mean, Chip, again, great to hear how, in 1 year, how quickly you guys, advance. But I just wanted to kind of get a comment for those who are perhaps just starting to think through international. And, we've had some discussion here in terms of where you started, Chip. English-speaking markets have often been, the starting point for many brands, lack of translation, et cetera, kind of being at the heart of, some of that. But Rob, what's your take on this? For those companies who are thinking of entry, is it a broad-based entry? Is it a focus? What do you usually look for when you're talking to the company?
Our position as a business is we're here to enable, not to prescribe unless asked. So if brands want to do a cut over to 200 countries day one, they absolutely can, and our client success will be there to support them. If they'd like to be more intentional about it, test the top 10, 20 markets, hone the customer experience, and then roll out to the rest of the world, we'll enable that. We see a balance of both. I think certainly in terms of focus, the top 20 markets should be the most focused. You're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. You can't manage tests across 200 countries at the same time, but doing that for 20 is doable and you get good lift. What do you think, Chit?
Agree. I mean, so we have sold in 69 countries. Obviously, all 69 of those are not English native speaking countries. When we talk about focus, it's more on the optimization side that Rob's mentioning. So, we're probably running 10 country A/B tests at once, similar thematic ones across every one. Generally, they tend to follow the same theme. There's a very rare case for us where 9 countries, it works one way and one the other way. Like it tends to be a similar experience. So, as we hone in on that strategy and more of that data, if that kind of pattern continues to hold, then we can just roll that out across the remainder, 160 or whatever countries that we're not testing. So that's been our philosophy as well.
Good stuff. Well, gentlemen, we have run out of time, unfortunately, but I'm gonna take Rob up on his suggestion that Chip, we check back in with you in a year and just see how much further you've been able to progress. I mean, I do think the localization opportunities for the made in cookware business are enormous. To what you were saying, just the local celebrities and obviously very different food cultures around the world. So you have all sorts of runway ahead of you. It's going to be very exciting to kind of see it going forward. Rob, as always, thank you very much, for joining us and sharing, some of your vast experience there. For those of you in the audience, stay tuned. We've got a brief break here, around 10 minutes. We're going to resume around right at 3 p.m. Eastern time. You can leave your window open here, and the next session will start up, automatically. Rob, Chip, thank you very much both for joining us here today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chip.
Thank you for having us. Yep.